Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Wednesday video where I look at your questions and answer them and do all that stuff. That's what I do on Wednesdays. I get your questions the prior week, and then I answer them this week. So, got a lot of really great questions this week. We're going to get right into it. First question comes from Mark Webb, who wrote, I know your primary focus is on gold and Silver Age comics, but I was curious if you have any issues featuring Darkman. There was at least one 6-issue run in the 90s, which I own, and a couple issues based on the movie itself, but I didn't know of any others. Darkman is a character that I thought had a lot of potential, but seems to have just fizzled out. Thoughts? Okay, so I actually like the Darkman movie. My wife, strangely, is like a Liam Neeson mega fan. Anything Liam Neeson, she'll watch. So we watched many Liam Neeson movies. Too many, too many. I'm still traumatized by watching all these Liam Neeson films, but she loves Liam Neeson. So we watch a lot of Liam Neeson stuff. But Darkman's actually a pretty cool movie. If you're not familiar with the synopsis of it, it's basically guy gets burned to a crisp, basically, and then he develops this synthetic skin that allows him to look like anyone he wants. So it's sort of like, kind of he can change into the people he wants to potentially infiltrate or kill or whatever. So it's a revenge story. Yeah, it's a very cool story, but it didn't go anywhere. It didn't do really that well at the box office, but it did well enough that it did have like a first appearance of Darkman in comics was actually in the Marvel magazine Darkman, the movie adaptation. But then they did a 4-issue miniseries that was also related to the movie, that came out like 1 month later. So we're talking October of 1990. And then there was a 6-part miniseries that came out after that. So there was actually 3 series, if you add those all together. But it didn't go anywhere. It didn't have the steam. Like, as I said, the movie didn't perform that well. So just there wasn't that much interest, but it was a cool story, and it's one of the movies that did help Liam Neeson establish himself as a main star for movies. So yeah, it's good in that way. So yeah, but personally, I like the movie. I wish they did more with the character. I just don't feel like it. There was so many other characters that have similar kind of traits that like I think of Mystique and stuff like that, but yeah, it just didn't go anywhere for whatever reason. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Darkman. Robbie Joseph wrote, what percentage of collectors do you think collect for hopes of their comics becoming valuable? Thank you. So I think 100% of collectors want their comics to become more valuable over time. Like 100%. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, okay. But is that the primary focus of collectors? No. That I think a very small percentage of collectors collect based on just, I want these things to go up in value. Because if that is the only driving factor for collecting comics, well, there's a million other things that are actually way better investments than comics that you could invest your money in to hope to get more money out of it. So I think the reason most people collect is not for sheer growth of the value of the collection, but it is a nice bonus. So there's very few things you can do in life where you can enjoy it and also make money off of it. That's one of the benefits of comics. You can read them, you can enjoy the art of them, you can enjoy having a piece of history, you can have all those things, and that's why people collect. But there is this side bonus of, hey, maybe these will go up over time. But I think a lot of collectors are also realistic, and they know that majority of the comics that they buy will actually become less valuable over time. And the reason I say that is if you buy comics off the newsstand, maybe a few of them will go up in value, like one or two, a few of them. But a lot of them will be, you could probably 10 years later find them in the dollar bin. A lot of them aren't going to be anything of value. And that's part of the reality of comic collecting, that majority of the comics that we buy or that are ever produced aren't going to be worth more than even when they were first released. So you're losing money right off the bat buying the comics. But that's okay. That's okay because if you enjoy the comics, you like the comics, well, that loss is not a big loss because you might win on other comics. So that's kind of where I sort of stand, that a lot of people, we buy comics more out of the passion for the hobby rather than to sheerly make money. And sometimes we know that we're buying at a loss, but we just want to have those comics for whatever reason. So yeah, hope that answers the question. So I'd say 100% would be the answer, but understanding the context. Okay, I like what I buy. Wrote, can you show some robot covers from the Golden Age? Yeah, I have a huge robot cover collection, and I'm going to show you it. So this is not all of my robot covers, but it's a good percentage of them. So we got Lars of Mars. This nice robot cover. Some Good Girl and Robot. I like I like these sexy girls on the covers. I'm not sure if you knew that, but I do. So this is Lars of Mars. And another one, I love this robot cover. This is Jeddah. And it's just a great one where the robot's chasing after the girl and he's got like little metallic hearts that are going up. I just think it's a really cute one. So this is Jeddah, number 4 or 6? Number 6. Okay. And then we have another Ziff Davis cover that's got a really great romance / robot cover. Get this, the Invasion of the Love Robots. They're kissing on the cover. So that's one of my favorite. This is actually a really beautiful cover. And we have Out of This World. I like these ones where the robot or person is carrying the girl and I think this is a really cute one. So Out of This World, number 1 from 1950, and it's a cover by Jean Fawcett. And we got Brick Bradford, number 6. This is probably the most desired Brick Bradford cover. It's a great giant robot cover, and it's by Alex Schomburg. Just a classic cover. I first saw this from Alex the Comic Quarter. He had it as a big poster in his background. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I have to get that one. So Brick Bradford, number 6. And then we have, this is one of the more humorous ones in a way, because this is Adventures into the Unknown. It's a 3D comic, and it looks like he's humping the train. It's no other way of saying it, but that's what he looks like he's doing. It's this giant robot. He's like taking out this big train. And yeah, this is from American Comics Group, which is ACG, and it's from 1954, and it's a Harry Lazarus cover. And it's just a really cool, because it's also 3D. They did this True Vision 3D where they would make the borders all black, and then they would make the backgrounds very, very subtle and like having very little color, and then they would make the foreground item like figures kind of pop out by having them kind of go outside of the panel and also kind of being more bright and colorful. So it's just a really cool effect, that makes them look 3D, even though it's not using 3D glasses. So True Vision, very cool technology. And then we got another Alex Schomburg, where he's battling robots, and this is Exciting Comics. Exciting Comics number, what is it, number 45, I think? I don't know, my vision's not so good. Okay, so we got Exciting Comics, battling a robot there, and we have another classic Alex Schomburg one. You'll notice that I like Alex Schomburg based on just the number of covers I have of his. This is Startling 49, and that's the precursor for Bender, the inspiration for Bender. And again, it's another one where the robot is carrying the girl off. She's in bondage, wearing a red dress, has all the great stuff going on. And I just love this cover. It's like one of my favorite Alex Schomburg covers. And then we have another one where this is a Good Girl plus robot cover. This is Candy number 25, and it's just a great robot one where it's like Good Girl meets robots, so it's kind of fun. And the last one, but not least by any stretch of the imagination, is Smash Comics number 1. And if you're not familiar with this book, this is actually the very first robot cover. So these are all my, this is kind of like a little sample of my robot covers from the Golden Age, and I figured this one should be last because it's the first. So yeah, so it's the very first robot cover from the Golden Age, and it's Bozo the Robot. That's him right there. And this was done by, it doesn't say who did the cover, strangely. Huh, that's really odd. But yeah, but it's Bozo the Robot. And it's really cool. So in his back, he has like a little panel, and the guy would actually go inside and control the robot. So yeah, so that's my robot collection. Hope you enjoy. So yeah, let me get to the next question. Okay, Chonko Comics wrote, if you were to speculate on Golden Age comic values 5 to 10 years from now, prospectively rank these three: war comics, Western comics, and pulps. Okay, so a lot of this really depends on movies, actually. If you look at during the 60s and 50s, there were Westerns were really, really popular. And a lot of people bought Western comics. A lot of, when you find these like collections of Golden Age comics, you would be surprised by how many Western comics are inside of them. And that's because, people really liked Westerns back then. Now, Westerns were kind of overly produced, maybe, like there was just too many. And I guess kind of people got bored of them, and we moved on to sci-fi, and then moved on to the next thing and the next thing. So Westerns have really fallen out of favor for the last 30 to 40, maybe 50 years. However, if you look at war comics, they were also popular during the Korean War, during the Second World War. War comics were really, really popular. Part of the reason war comics kind of fell out of favor was people really wanted to move away from war. It was like the whole, when there's war, people are interested in it. But when the war ends, in a way, people just kind of want to move away from them. That's why if you look at the Second World War to the Korean War, there was sort of a period in there where Good Girl and other comic covers comic types were popular, because people would just want to sort of forget about the war for a little while. If we go into another war phase, well, we can see war comics becoming a big thing. If we go into a new phase in terms of, hey, let's do something we haven't done for a while, Westerns could become a big thing. Now, pulps, actually, I think they had their heyday a year ago, when they started first grading pulps. That really, I think, resuscitated the pulp hobby. I mean, it really gave it a, new lease on life, because a lot of people don't really like pulps, mainly because of their pulpy nature. And so I feel like pulps had their chance back a year ago. The values had sort of shot up when there was this concept of them getting graded, and they have since fallen. I see pulps going fairly inexpensively most of the time, but people still ask for big money on a lot of them, but they just don't go for big money. There are a few exceptions to that. Obviously, there's like some big grails within the pulps. Obviously, like All Story or Weird Tales. There's some that are really, really big. But so I just wanted to give that context to the three choices that you gave. With that in mind, I feel like war has the most probability of becoming a thing that people are interested in, just because there is all these tensions of potential wars going on right now. And I think 5 to 10 years from now, war will be kind of like one of those things that people will be interested in, more so than the other two. So I think war will be that top of the list, and you get more extreme covers. Like, people like the more extreme covers. And if you look at the Golden Age war covers and you look at the 50s war covers, they're pretty extreme, and people like those. So I think war has the best potential to be number one on the list. Number two would be, in my opinion, the Westerns, because there are, some cool Western stories, and they're really undervalued right now. So there's a lot of potential for them to go up in value, because they're just, they're on the floor. They're below the floor. They're just so undervalued that that gives a lot of opportunity for them to go up in value. So because there's just nowhere else to go. They hit rock bottom. It's all up from there. Pulps just have never really excited people. So I think comic collectors generally just haven't embraced pulps. Even when there was that hype a year ago, it just didn't catch on. The fire didn't ignite within the comic book community. So I think they have the least amount of hope to really go up in the next 5 to 10 years. Though, as I said, there are exceptions to that, where, some of those key pulp books have a lot of potential. But that's kind of where I stand on those. So war, Western, pulps. It would be the order of the three. Hope that gives some clarity to that. I could be wrong. This is me predicting 5 to 10 years from now. I could be wrong. But yeah. Okay. Archivist Adrift wrote, okay, this is a long question. He actually wrote a big paragraph before this saying this is going to be a long question. So I'm going to read it. I'm the most dyslexic guy out there, so bear with my reading. I apologize. If you need to fast forward 2 or 3 minutes to just endure my question being read, then please do so. But I'll try to read this. It might be fun just to hear me mess up. Okay. Okay, let's go through this one. As you know, Sticky Goose recently made a video where he was pointing out that most people don't care about your collection. You generally, Sticky Goose was, nobody cares about you. They don't care about your collection. They just, it was very, very negative thing. And like most Sticky's controversial videos, he does have a point, especially concerning the types of comics that he himself got into collecting during the COVID bubble, which seemed to be mostly modern stuff. But I argued in his comments that the Silver Age books are different in kind because of their incredible rarity and historical nobility and notability. I've had friends and family find my collection fascinating because of their antiquity and because of their unique themes. And this had me thinking, most of Sticky Goose's videos are based on collecting modern comics. And specifically, his interactions with modern comic collectors on YouTube. So after that, my question to you is, what are some of the major differences you've noticed between yourself as a Golden Age comic YouTuber and the majority of comic book community YouTubers? For instance, in many ways, modern collectors have a different set of criteria for which books are spec worthy versus modern collectors, pre-modern collectors. And there are modern YouTube channels that focus on that subject alone. To clarify, I'm not so much interested in the particulars of collecting modern versus pre-modern, but more on what it's like being a pre-modern YouTuber in a sea of modern YouTubers. Okay, so I want to address a little bit about what Sticky Goose said first, and then I'll get into your actual question. So Sticky Goose said that basically people were not interested in you or your collection. They don't care what books you have. They really don't. That's what his thing was. And my thought was really, I believe that when you make your content, and just like the way I make my content, I don't have a big channel. Like, I really don't. There's a lot of bigger channels, a lot of channels that have grown way faster than I have. But the type of people that watch my content, I've curated in a weird way by the type of content that I create. So Sticky Goose generally creates content that is controversial, insulting half the time, demeaning of the hobby in many ways. And so the type of people that he's curated are those people that are in that mindset. Even the people that aren't in that mindset, because of the style of his videos, they come into his channel with that mindset. I watch his videos. I don't consider myself to be a hater in any way, but I do come in watching his videos with that kind of almost rebellious or like antagonistic view, because his videos are very antagonistic and kind of encourages that kind of feedback from his audience. So that's kind of where I come from on him. My videos, on other hand, I feel like I try to make the hobby very positive. I try to, I see this as my oasis, and I try to bring you into my oasis. And because it is an oasis where we are just enjoying the hobby, enjoying the books, I feel like people often will come to me in that light. They'll have the same kind of attitude. So you sort of reflect what you put out. So if I put out negativity, well, I'll get negativity back. If I put out positivity, I will generally get positivity back. And so that's the difference between me and Sticky Goose, and our audiences for that matter. And generally, I find that the people, I feel like they actually do care about me for the most part. At least I hope you guys care about me. And they actually know what comics I have. So a lot of the time, people will tell me, oh, I'll forget. I have so many books. Sometimes I'll forget what I have in my own collection, and I'll have people who watch my videos that remind me, oh, you have this book. Oh, but you don't have this one maybe. And they'll help me, and it's kind of cool that way. I find that there's that very giving element to the community that I've created. Okay, so that's me addressing Sticky Goose. Now, me addressing your question, how does it feel to be a pre-modern YouTuber in a sea of modern YouTubers? Well, it is a challenge. I see these modern channels where they just do hot comics of the week. It's the same crap every time. Like, sorry to say it that way, but it's the same stuff all the time. And I'm like, oh, and they recycle the same lists all the time. It drives me crazy, actually. I see it all the time, and people love that kind of content. And for the most part, they do really well, and their channels grow very, very fast. My channel has grown very slowly. It is kind of growing, but it's growing slowly. So often I feel like, man, I'm so niched. Like, how many collectors? Like, there's a huge number of collectors out there, and then I'm addressing a very small sliver of that much bigger community. So it's always that challenge, where I feel like I've kind of pigeonholed myself into such a small niche that sometimes I feel like there's no way I'm ever going to achieve my ultimate goal of being cool in my children's eyes by reaching 10,000 subscribers. If I can reach 10,000 subscribers, I am considered cool in my kids' eyes, and that's ultimately my goal with this channel. Um, so I don't think I'm going to reach it because there's just not enough Golden Age collectors or people interested in Golden Age stuff to get to that level. And sometimes I feel like I'm sort of the odd man out in terms of the community as well. Like I see all these channels and they're always like, everyone's engaging with them, and I feel a little bit of like the black sheep and I'm wearing black, so that's convenient. Because I am looking at things differently. I am like, I'm making hot lists, but it's hot lists of Golden Age comics. I'm making my own lists. I am sort of doing my own thing. And when you do your own thing, you build your audience, sure, but you're never going to be a big person on YouTube. You're not going to be like the big channels. It was funny. I actually almost did a partnership way back when with Mighty Comics. And at the time, I think I had about 1,000 subscribers. He had about 2,000 subscribers. So he was about twice as big as me at that time. And we considered it, but he didn't feel like it was a good fit because I am so specialized in the Golden Age. He likes Golden Age, but he just didn't feel like it was a good fit. And his channel has grown. He's like almost up to 20,000 subs now. Like mine's really just been dwarfed by his growth. And again, that's the difference in being so niched the way I am, compared to really having more of that broad appeal that he does. And also his video quality is better. There's more to it than just that, because I give him credit where it's due. He does produce a higher quality video, but it is hard. It is hard. Sometimes you can be a little bit lonely when you're when you're in such a tight niche, and you don't feel like you get the recognition that from all the hard work or whatever that other YouTubers get. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, the next question comes from K Munin. Are there any modern day stories that you feel can hold up to the quality of Gold and Silver Age books? Many thanks as always for your insight. Yeah, lots. Just because there's a lot of really bad modern comics does not mean that all modern comics are bad. I think of like Golden Age comics the same way. We sort of think of these Golden Age comics as being, oh, they're so great, and like there's a lot of bad Golden Age comic stories as well. They're just not really good. They, for whatever reason, they're just like I think of what's her name, Brenda Starr. It's like when I read her stories, I'm like, oh, they're so boring. Okay, and there's a lot like that. There's a lot of stories that aren't really that good. And the difference between modern versus Golden Age, a lot of the Golden Age stories are anthologies. So, and in between you get the Silver Age. So I'll kind of explain the differences between Golden and Silver and Modern. So Golden, for the most part, like 99% part, are anthologies. Short stories, gotta introduce the characters, introduce the story, and wrap up really, really quickly. Eight pages, kind of level of doing all those things. And you can only get so far with all those things, but a lot of the time in the Golden Age, they're very efficient about introducing characters, introducing their personalities, and introducing what's the world that they are trying to build, and then wrapping it up. They could do all that fairly quickly. So it's sort of like the Twilight Zone. If you love the Twilight Zone, you'll say, "Oh, Golden Age is the best." But Twilight Zone compared to the Invincible series. Invincible series is a whole bunch of episodes, that builds a really big story and really cool, fleshed out story. That's the difference. So I enjoy watching, Twilight Zone. I enjoy the anthologies, but in terms of the individual story, probably Invincible's better. It's got a more fleshed out story, and it's pretty impressive. And that's a modern story versus a Golden Age story. Silver Age kind of is in between, where you have like not anthologies, but you have like these stories that will go the full length of the comic, and they do a very good job of being very efficient in terms of introducing the character, introducing the plot, introducing the villain, and then wrapping up. And then even having arcs that go between more than one comic. The difference is with modern is that arc goes much, much further. So if you think about Invincible versus like Silver Age Flash, for example, well, Silver Age Flash maybe ran three comics, whereas the modern one might run 100. It's just like there's a difference there. There's a lot more you can achieve. The problem with modern sometimes, in the fact that they do spread them out over multiple comics, is a lot of the time they will be very inefficient within any particular comic. So you read a comic and you're like, oh, what did I learn? What do I even know about the character at this point? And very little happens in the comic. There's like a lot of very little content, and comparatively, and that could be a real problem with modern comics. Where they kind of spread it out a bit thin to try to it's almost like they're like, oh, we know we have to make this 6 or 7 issues or 20 issues or whatever it is, and they're just like, really like giving you very little to get that full story. Whereas in Golden Age, they do all that in 8 pages, right? It's just so crazy. And in Silver, they do it maybe within a few books or one book. So there's an efficiency in the Golden Age and Silver Age versus modern, but that doesn't mean that there isn't good stories. There's lots of good stories. So some of the stories that I like personally would be Invincible, would be Something is Killing the Children, first bits of it. 8 Billion Genies is a really good one. Saga, that's pretty awesome. The Watchmen, the first ones. V for Vendetta. I think those are copper, but there's some really good ones. What are some other ones? Some of the stuff with Star Wars, actually, some of the Dark Empire stuff is really great. There's just a lot of good stuff. There's good stuff in every era, so it's hard to just say, oh, this era sucks, or this era is good, or there's good stuff in every generation. You just have to weed out all the junk and focus on the good stuff. The only thing that I would say is I generally prefer the Golden Age more for that tapping into a different era. I really do love that kind of looking back at and seeing how people lived and the way that they thought back then, because I feel like we've sort of lost a lot of that culture in a way. I feel like our culture is a little bit misguided right now, and so I feel like tapping into sort of ancient knowledge or way people thought before is interesting for me. It's just a personal thing, but that doesn't mean that all modern comics are junk. It means that some are, just like some were in the past. So hopefully that answers your question. Bagged and Broke wrote, really starting to get into Canadian reprints of Golden Age Captain Marvel books with limited ink. Me and my dad find them super interesting. as I was just curious if you had any yourself. I have two in my collection. One I didn't bring both, but I just brought one. This is a reprint, kind of, and I'll explain that. This is Wiz Comics, and you'll notice that it has a very cool cover. This kind of good girl swimsuit cover, even a bit of a bikini girl there on the side. And it's just a really cool one. These are super rare. These were Canadian whites. Canadian whites, as you said, limited ink. Well, they would do very, very basic reprints. Or sometimes they would just have the rights to print in Canada, and they would just reprint the story in Canada. Now, they were considered Canadian whites because the interior, they were usually these two-tone covers, and then the interior would be black and white. So the white paper gave it its name of being Canadian whites. And the Canadian whites were basically books that were printed in Canada because we had a trade embargo with the United States at the time, where you could not import comics into Canada. Now, I've actually heard a story recently where they said that they actually had a whole bunch of things where they blocked the import of American goods into Canada because of the war efforts. They really wanted to promote Canadian business and really be protectionist for the Canadian market. Now they realized that they when they were making up the list of things, like it included like umbrellas and all this kind of stuff, a lot of the industries that were on the list were political friends of the ones making the decision what was on the list or not. Now they picked comics only because they really didn't they wanted to put a certain number of things on the list, and they were just like, oh, we'll just add comics. It really was that kind of level of insight that they gave to it. It wasn't that they were thinking that, oh, we got to save the comic book industry in Canada, because there was none. There really wasn't a comic book industry in Canada prior to this trade embargo. So once they blocked the industry, blocked American comics from coming into Canada, well, then there was still a demand for comics, and Canadian companies rose to fill that demand. And that's where we get companies like Anglo-American, where is it? There we go. Anglo-American AA Comics, who was one of the big benefiters of this trade embargo, the War Measures Act. And so basically there was Anglo-American, Maple Leaf, Superior were some of the big ones. So yeah, that's my Canadian white, and it's Wiz Comics one. So a lot of the ones that they would reprint would be based on popularity. So Wiz was very popular prior to this trade embargo. So people, they got the rights and they would print them in Canada. Okay, next question comes from AG, and he wrote, in your collection, which books have the most interesting provenance? Okay, so whenever I think of provenance, I actually think pedigrees, and I'll actually get into provenance as well. There's a difference between provenance and pedigree. Provenance is actually so a pedigree is a collection of books from a single collector who actually bought them off the newsstand. That's pedigree in comics. Provenance is where did this comic come from? Did it, which hands did it pass through? How do we know that it's real? Usually it's referring to paintings. How do you know that is Chagall or Picasso? What's the provenance to prove that it's a real whatever it is? That's usually provenance. I'm going to interpret this as pedigree. What is the most interesting pedigree, or that history behind it? So I'm going to show you this one. This is a pedigree, and it's a pedigree for the Promise collection. Now, for me, this is probably the most interesting one that I have. I wish I had like some of the Okajima collection. I think those have even more of a cool story. But this is from my collection. I think this has the most cool provenance. And there's actually, I say that with kind of both in mind here. So pedigree and provenance. So this one is from the Provenance collection. Basically, it was two brothers. One had a massive collection, and they both had to go to the Korean War. And there was a promise made that if one of the brothers died, that the other brother would care for their collection. And they died. They did die, and so the brother kept the promise until he died, and then the collection was sold off, and it became the Promise Collection pedigree. Now, the interesting thing about the Promise Collection was it was released during COVID. So there was a lot of hype. It was at the top of the market in terms of not just being a new pedigree, but because of that hype around collecting and the hobby itself. During COVID, everyone was just sort of focused on collecting stuff. So Promise Collection did extremely well. We were seeing like 3x the pricing on books. So there was a lot of that happening. So I actually bought this during that hype. Now, this one is especially cool because it is the highest grade copy for this book. And it is one where it's related to that whole history of the destruction of the innocent. So that's Frederick Wortham right there, like a picture of him, and even shows psychologist over there. And then he's gagged and bound. And then it has like a note to Frederick Wortham saying, hey, look, crime comics are not the end-all, be-all, worst thing for kids. We actually teach kids good values, and we tell them to avoid crime, right? So this has got that cool history behind it. Now, for me, I like this book for all those reasons, and it is cool to have that piece of history where it's connected to some previous collector. Now, the provenance behind this book is very limited. It's really just two owners, myself and the previous owner, which was in that collection where it was really just, so there was not that long history of like, oh, this book went into this guy's hands, oh, it went into that guy's hands, and then it got into my hands. It really was like the collection, the brother, when he died, it got sold, and I was the one that picked it up. So yeah, that's that's the history on that one. But I am a big fan of pedigrees. I think they're cool because gives that sense of history as well. There's a little bit more context behind the comic, because like you can certain pedigrees or certain collections, you'll see this where you'll see the certain style of what kind of books they were buying, and it's kind of interesting. It's almost like you're getting into that little child's mind in terms of what they were interested in. And crime was big back then. Okay, so that's hopefully you enjoyed that. Now Kerry wrote, I can never pronounce his Danish name, but his name is Kerry. Okay, what is your take on hoarding comics? I ask this because I always get a little sad when I see dealers posting images of 10 images of Wolverine #1 and other highly collectible comics. As you know, I'm a man with not much money, and I follow auctions with people with much more money than I and are bidding on books which they have in their collection multiple times. How do we balance the fine line between being a collector and being an investor, or a hoarder in this case? So a good example of that is Anna Love. If you go to Instagram and you check out Anna Love, She has like crime suspense story. Crime Suspense Stories 22, maybe like 5 copies of it or 10 copies of it. She has Chamber of Chills, maybe 5 copies of that or 10 copies of that. She has like a whole bunch of these really rare books that there maybe is only 20 or 30 on the census, and she'll have multiple copies of those. To me, that's annoying. I do believe in spreading the love. I can understand, like, when a new comic comes out, there's a lot of speculation around it, and you buy 2 copies or 3 copies of it just because you want to kind of cash in on that speculation. I can understand that. But if it's a Golden Age book, or if it's a book from the Bronze Age, or if it's a book like that's been around for long enough that everybody knows the spec, everybody, it is what it is. It's established. I don't really understand the reasoning of having like 3 or 4 copies. I can understand 2, where you buy 1 and you want to upgrade and you have another, and maybe you have 2 copies and then you sell off the lower copy. I can understand that. I can totally understand that, and I do that myself. I buy comics where I later on upgrade them, and then I have 2 copies, and then I usually will sell the lower grade copy. So I can understand that. And I understand it with dealers. Dealers have to have that inventory of 10 books or 20 books of whatever issue it is that's desired, because they'll have the clientele to buy those books. So that's normal. I see that as totally normal, and that's fine. But I don't like collectors hoarding books personally, that are preventing other collectors from ever getting a chance to even buy or see that book. I really kind of think, you should share the love is the way I, say it simply. I can understand why people really love books and get multiple copies. I really do understand it, but I personally feel like there's sort of a balance that has to happen, where you can be a bit of a hoarder for that book, and I think that isn't good for the hobby. Sell some of the extra books. Okay, so and it is hard to strike that balance between being a collector and an investor. As I was saying, if I can understand with the more modern stuff, buying 2 or 3 copies, but in the Golden Age, don't do that. Okay, next one is, and the last question comes from Charles Day. Trust you to do a deep dive on how to submit books and the approximate cost to CGC until I still don't understand it. I'm actually thinking of making a video that will be a deep dive into CGC submissions. I am not an expert on that. Really, I haven't done enough CGC submissions myself to be an expert on it. But I do plan to create a video which would be a step-by-step guide to how to do a CGC submission. There's a lot of things that, and I'll say a few of them right now, that I think people should do when submitting to CGC. I've heard way too many horror stories of things going wrong at CGC. So one of the things that I recommend before you submit your books to CGC is document them. Really take photos of the books, so that you know all the damage that they have prior to you sending them to CGC. Because I've heard things where, covers have gotten detached, pieces have been removed, things happen. And that's part of the whole process of people opening up your books. Things could get damaged. So document your books before sending them. That's just a step that I think everyone should take, but I will do a bigger step-by-step process in maybe a Saturday video. You'll see that, and I will go through the whole process of how do you document your books, which books do you send, maybe even this could be a series, and tell me in the comments below if you want this series. But really go through all the things that you need to know, like the full complete guide to submitting your books to CGC. And yeah, I can do that. So tell me in the comments below if that's something you're interested in. So again, thanks everyone for asking all these great questions. If you have a question you want answered, give it to me in the comments below, and I will answer it next week. However, the question has to be on this video before Thursday, because I'm going to record the video on Friday. So I'm going to be away for a week, so I have to record the video before I leave. So you got to get your questions in quickly. So again, thanks for watching. Bye for now.